The first lesson comes from Isaiah. And these verses come from a conclusion of a section of Isaiah that starts in chapter 6, that is sometimes called Isaiah's testimony. On one hand, in this testimony, Isaiah speaks of a coming Messiah, someone who will help us know that God is with us. On the other hand, he also speaks works of foreboding, of judgment and suffering. Right before this passage, Isaiah says that things will be bleak during the time of King Ahaz. In today's passage, this bleakness is contrasted with promises that indicate a reversal in the historical predicament of Israel. In the last verse of chapter 8, it says that the people will be thrust into thick darkness. In these first verses of chapter 9, Isaiah contrasts this darkness with a coming light. But there will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time, God brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, God will make glorious the way of the sea, the land, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You have multiplied exultation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you, as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken, as on the day of Midian. Okay. The second lesson is from the Psalms. And anytime I read a psalm, I can't help but look for the passages, look for the spots in there that show up in one of our anthems. I didn't find any in this one, but they're a song to God. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? One thing I asked of the Lord, this I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in the temple. For God will hide me in holy shelter in the day of trouble. God will conceal me under the cover of the tabernacle and will set me high on a rock. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in the tabernacle sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come, my heart says. Seek God's face. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You who have been my help, do not cast me off. Do not forsake me, O God of my salvation.
This past Wednesday started off quite nicely for me. It began gently. I attended a morning webinar that got my creative juices flowing about Lent. After lunch, I turned to my big Wednesday task, which is putting together the order of worship and the bulletin and all the materials that worship leaders are going to need for the coming Sunday. There were a few administrative matters that needed my attention, and as always, there were a whole bunch of emails, some of which actually needed some thoughtful replies. The theme I had settled on for today's service was embracing laughter as a spiritual practice, and that idea kept bubbling inside me as I went about the other tasks of the day. Laughter as a spiritual practice was amusing me by the time I got to dinner, which I suppose is what it should do. And then I checked social media. And I learned about 3 things that had happened on Wednesday in Minneapolis. One of them technically happened nationwide, but was going to have an immediate impact in Minneapolis. This is the front page of Thursday's Minneapolis Star Tribune covering Wednesday's news. They covered the three events as front page news. The first was the story of ICE, who detained a 5-year-old preschooler after using him as bait to get someone in his home to open their door. And then ICE transferred this 5-year-old and his father from Minnesota to detention in Texas. His family has an active asylum case, and it does not have an order of deportation, meaning they are in the United States legally. ICE detained them and shipped them across the country anyway. The lack of compassion for the child, the choice to use this child to traumatize this child, is evil. It is the only word I can use to describe it. The second story was about footage that I saw on social media from Minneapolis that showed a federal agent spraying a chemical irritant directly into the eyes of a man who was pinned to the ground and held there by other federal agents. After reading about the 5-year-old and watching this video of chemicals being sprayed into the eyes of someone pinned to the ground who was showing no signs of struggle, I was hopping mad. In the video, it looked to me like the federal agent walked away from the spraying incident hunting for someone else to spray. I want that agent arrested under Minnesota law for assault causing grievous bodily harm. And then I read the story that broke on Wednesday about a secret memo that was signed back in May of 2025, signed by the acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons. This memo says that federal agents do not need a judge's warrant to force their way into people's homes. Dr. Heather Cox Richardson summarized what is at stake in this memo. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, one of the 10 amendments that make up the Bill of Rights, says, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." As Joyce White Vance of Civil Discourse notes, courts have always interpreted this amendment to mean that a judge must sign a warrant to allow officers to break into a home. Now the Department of Homeland Security says it does not need such a judicial warrant, but can simply use an administrative warrant signed by an officer of the Department of Homeland Security or of ICE if immigrants believed to be inside the home have a final order of removal. Meanwhile, the legal training manual of the Department of Homeland Security itself quotes the 1984 Supreme Court decision that the, quote, "physical entry of the home is the chief evil against which the wording of the Fourth Amendment was directed." Immigration law specialist Aaron Richland-Melnick noted that this memo is a big deal. It is the federal government conspiring in secret to subvert the Fourth Amendment. Now, Heather Cox Richardson has a way of describing things rationally. I was not feeling rational Wednesday night. I was enraged. I was unable to sleep. I felt powerless to do anything but write an email to my senators and representative, and I was so enraged I have no idea if my email made any sense. I am not typically at a loss for words. On Wednesday night, I was so angry I could not breathe. I finally did fall asleep around 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up Thursday morning still deeply angry. And Mr. Rogers came to my aid. For some reason, the Facebook algorithm popped this meme into my feed, a quote from Mr. Rogers. When those things that we care about so deeply become endangered, we become enraged. And what a healthy thing that is. Without it, we would never stand up and speak out for what we believe. I am so grateful for Mr. Rogers naming my rage as healthy, something that can empower my action. Later on Thursday, I read an essay about how ICE is behaving the way the Ku Klux Klan behaved in the Jim Crow South. Somehow, Dr. Cheryl Townsend Gillies found words to express what's happening. Currently, the United States is facing the unprecedented growth of a law enforcement group using masks and terror to do its work. These armed and masked ICE officers have been seen dragging people from cars, smashing into cars with Halligan tools, a forcible entry tool, tear gassing and pepper spraying schools and daycare centers, smashing into houses without warrants, raiding entire apartment houses, stopping people because of their accent or skin color, and engaging in roundups rather than orderly, due process-oriented arrests. And now in Minnesota, we see the murder of Renee Good, an unarmed American citizen, very white woman who was subjected to conflicting ICE officers' orders. According to the conversation I had with a police superintendent, these ICE officers were inadequately trained and had not passed Policing 101. We are learning that these masked men, and it seems to be overwhelmingly men, have been given significant signing bonuses, been offered student loan relief, have been allowed lowered standards of fitness, and have been provided with a shortened training period. When compared to the training that is required to become a police officer, one wonders if we are witnessing the creation of a mob of masked night riders with a badge. Dr. Gillies concludes, instead of Ku Klux Klan, it is now ICE that wears masks to hide their faces as they brutalize and kill. The states that have laws against masking, and there are a number of states that passed laws against masking because of the Klan, states that have laws against masking for such purposes need to revive them and attempt to enforce them against ICE. Other states need, if possible, to legislate against this evil. Public servants on the public payroll must face the full light of day in the performance of their duties. They must unmask and be fully accountable. Mr. Rogers is right. We need our rage. We need to harness our rage to empower our speaking out. And I was almost there by dinner time on Thursday. I was seeing parallels between the bleakness that we are facing and the bleakness of the Hebrew people that they faced during the reign of King Ahaz. Maybe I thought I can hear a word of promise the way Isaiah heard a word of promise. Maybe I can trust that in a land of deep darkness, light is shining. Maybe joy does come in the morning. Perhaps I can segue in my sermon to the power of laughter to build community, something we desperately need in dark times. And by Thursday night, I was hearing from friends and colleagues who had already arrived in Minneapolis in response to a call for clergy from across the nation to gather there. Most would arrive Thursday night, over 700 faith leaders from across the country. Jack Jenkins reported that on Thursday morning, around 200 faith leaders, some of them from out of state, some from Minnesota, fanned out across the city to observe and document the actions of immigration and customs enforcement. Some of the clergy confronting Department of Homeland Security agents, adding a visible religious presence to widespread efforts to counter the president's mass deportation campaign in the region. Faith leaders who are in Minneapolis as part of a larger convening focused on religious pushback to ICE deployed to neighborhoods with significant immigrant populations where DHS agents have been most active during the ongoing campaign known as Operation Metro Surge. The clergy, who hail from a range of traditions and worship communities across the country, sang in the buses as they ventured out into the streets. They belted out hymns and sang songs during the civil rights movement, popular during the civil rights movement, such as Woke Up This Morning. Before I went to bed, I found myself smiling as I read stories about a group of Buddhist monks on their 120-day, 2,300-mile walk for peace from Fort Worth, Texas, to Washington, D.C. By Friday night, stories coming out of Minneapolis had my heart soaring. There were stories about a protest at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. NPR reported Friday morning protesters also gathered at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, where the Department of Homeland Security has chartered flights of people detained in the state to detention centers out of state. Clergy and community members sang hymns and prayed outside the airport. About 100 clergy were arrested at the protest, organizers told NPR. Airport police said those arrested were issued misdemeanor citations for trespassing, failure to comply with peace officers, and were released. There are stories about the general strike and photographs of a big march in downtown Minneapolis. Here's how the local TV station WCCO described it. Hundreds of businesses in the Twin Cities were closed Friday to protest the presence of federal immigration agents in Minnesota, as thousands of demonstrators have taken to the streets in downtown Minneapolis in a show of solidarity over Operation Metro Surge crackdown. Community members asked for no work, no school, and no shopping, calling it a day of truth and freedom. Some small business owners have called on elected leaders to act to limit U.S. immigration and customs enforcement operations in the state. Thousands of people marched from outside, it's actually tens of thousands, but WCCO is being conservative. Thousands of people marched from outside U.S. Bank Stadium in downtown Minneapolis to the Target Center, where a rally took place inside. I went to bed Friday night feeling hopeful. I wasn't excited about needing to get up at 6:30 on Saturday morning, but I was excited about why I was going to get up at 6:30 on Saturday morning. I was going to a non-cooperation training. We weren't 5 minutes into the training when it was announced that federal agents had shot and killed another protester in Minneapolis. There weren't any details yet available, and so we went forward with the training. By sundown yesterday, we knew that the victim was Alex Preti, and that the Department of Homeland Security was again lying about what happened and who was to blame. Preti was a 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse at a veterans hospital. He spent his professional life helping people. He was an American hero, and he was murdered by Trump's regime. This is not okay. On Wednesday, my intention was to preach about harnessing laughter as a spiritual practice. And I believe laughter can be a spiritual practice. I also know that that is a sermon for another day. Today, I invite you to consider anger as a spiritual practice. May your anger move you to stand up and speak out for what you believe. Amen.